Good evening. The story behind the murders.
A special investigation on the Essex drugs executions. As two men are jailed for the triple murder, weave the full story on the events that led up to the killings. The victims' friends and family talk exclusively to us.
Plus, how advertising is invading your child's school. A special report on the business of learning, 90s style.
And why modern mums and dads say it's time for a change.
But first this evening, the trail of evil that led to triple murder in the Essex countryside. Tonight, the men who gunned down 3 drugs dealers in cold blood are behind bars, starting life sentences.
The killings were the culmination of a vicious underworld feud. Tonight, friends and relatives of the victims reveal exclusively the chilling chain of events that led to the murders. But first, Christopher Peacock recaps on the day's developments in court.
Hidden from view, a Range Rover is removed by lorry to a mortuary. It contained the remains of 3 drug dealers who met their deaths on a snowy winter's day just over 2 years ago. Drug dealing is a dishonourable trade, and there was no dignity in the hard-packed snow of the Essex countryside when a farmer stumbled on a vehicle parked up a deserted farm track. Inside were the bodies of 3 men, assassinated with pump-action shotguns, each murdered in cold blood with bullet wounds to the head. As police frogmen broke the ice looking for the murder weapons, it became clear this was a classic execution to settle a bad drug score, a dispute over smuggled cannabis. Murder squad detectives were familiar with the pattern. Dealing in drugs is often the province of the double cross, the sting and the double deal. And so it was that 2 drugs barons decided to eliminate 3 dealers with chilling efficiency at Whitehorse Farm at Rettendon near Chelmsford. Michael Steele, who dubbed himself the Angel of Death, was given 3 life sentences. He's said to have laughed uncontrollably after killing the men. Also given the same sentence, Jack Womes, his right-hand man. The pair were trapped by Darren Nichols, the driver of the killer's getaway car, who turned supergrass. It was his evidence that would prove crucial in the conviction of the 2 men. As a result, he's now been given a change of identity and is being protected at a safe house by the police. The officer in charge of the investigation left the court a satisfied man after the judge said the killings had a hard-bitten edge that could only horrify and stagger non-criminal minds. At the Old Bailey, this is Christopher Peacock for London Tonight.
Patrick Tate, Anthony Tucker and Craig Rolfe died as a result of a festering row over a smuggled shipment of poor-quality cannabis. But what's the full story behind their murders? Marcus Powell spoke to some of the people who knew them best to compile this special report.
Pat Tate, a violent criminal and drug dealer who died in a gangland shooting, gets a graveside visit from his friend, former bouncer and criminal Bernard O'Mahony. Tate and fellow drug dealer Craig Rolfe are buried side by side in an Essex cemetery. They died together with Tony Tucker, a security firm boss and a minder for the boxer Nigel Benn. A trio of drug dealers wiped out in an underworld feud.
They were immersed in a very lucrative trade, drugs trade. They were surrounded by wannabes and fan dancers who almost hero worshipped them, and that adoration and the money that brought in built up their egos, and they lost track of who they really were, really. And it was that attitude, I believe, eventually got them killed.
O'Mahony was head of security at Raquel's, the Basildon club where Leah Betts obtained the ecstasy pill that killed her. O'Mahony brought in Tate and his security firm to help control the club, and with it the drugs trade that thrived there. Each of them made hundreds of pounds a week by allowing their drug dealers in.
Whether Tony Tucker was there, whether I was there, or whether anybody else was there, that club needed drugs to exist as it was. And so he was, supplying a demand, really.
Drug dealers have as many enemies as friends. For Ivan Dibley, who originally led the triple murder hunt, his first job was to find out about the victims' lifestyles.
What they were actually doing, they were filtering the drugs dealers and lining their own pocket at the same time. What I mean by that is that when a drugs dealer came to the door, unless he paid a premium to get in, then he was kept out.
They made a small fortune. Tucker bought himself a £250,000 house and a Porsche to go with it. Pat Tate, filmed in prison, joined the firm, a violent partner to help with major drug deals. The firm became increasingly violent to protect their businesses and finally turned to killers themselves. They were always armed, but they killed with cunning. When Kevin Whitaker, one of their drug couriers, was robbed, they blamed him for the loss and decided to teach him a lesson. He was later found dead in a ditch. The death certificate said he'd taken a drugs overdose. His parents didn't believe it.
Kevin hated needles. He was right-handed. My immediate reaction was, hey, you don't tell me that he's committed suicide. He did not. Because as far as I'm concerned, he couldn't have done it. Could you inject, if you were right-handed, could you inject into your right arm?
The police have now come to the same conclusion, that Kevin was murdered by the firm.
They had forcibly injected Whitaker with a drug which is used in veterinary circumstances, and he was found beside the road, overdosed and very dead.
Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were later lured to their deaths on an isolated farm track. They'd crossed one drug dealer too many. Bernard O'Mahony had quit the firm. It was just in time.
Tony and Craig had murdered somebody. We weren't going in blind, we knew how deep we were in. We revelled in it to an extent.
The power through the violence.
Power through violence, yeah. And when Leah Betts died, it struck a chord with me and I left, fortunately. They continued and they paid the ultimate price, you know, they were murdered.
Their deaths were mourned by families and friends. For others, though, it was poetic justice.
Everyone deserves their life, whether they be a criminal or whatever else. That's not to say, however, that the general public in this particular case won't shed many tears because of their demise. A lot of the public will say, well, you know, good riddance.
In Essex, this is Marcus Powell for London Tonight.
The story behind the chilling case that ended at the Old Bailey today.